Phil Mickelson's one of the greatest players ever, but he does have a very, very unique swing that leads to some quite erratic shots. That's why you see Phil hitting some amazing recovery shots, primarily because his golf swing relies so much on timing and great hands. His hands are Phil's secret weapon. That's why he is such a dominant player, or was such a dominant player. Hands, he's just got great hands and touch. So we've got down the line, and then we've got face on. So let's have a little bit of a look here. So if we look from face on, you'll see pretty neutral grip, nothing overly different there. A little bit of spine tilt there. He's got a nice bit of flare in both of his feet there, just allowing that foot flare allows better hip rotation because of how those feet are placed. If we look from down the line, you'll notice how the arms are hanging just outside the shoulders. Nice neutral body positions. He is a little bit open here because he is playing a little bit of a cut, but really nice angles there. So if we take him into takeaway, you'll note Phil's got a very old school swing. I'm not drawing lines in terms of the body position because the camera is moving so much. You'll see his hands are taken outside a little bit on this one, just because he is playing that cut. You'll see how wide and straight those arms are. If I bring him face on, look at that arm position there. Look how long his trail arm is. You'll also notice, look how he just bumps a little bit into that trail side here. Slight bump in that takeaway position, and just loads and loads of width. Really no bend in that trail arm, and not hardly any set in those wrists, which we'll look at further on in the swing. You'll notice how that lead knee started to work down and in just to facilitate hip rotation there. So if we bring him back a little bit further, you can see how that lead knee starts to work down. You can see how that lead heel starts to work up, something that you can really take away from if you struggle with flexibility, because it just allows a little bit more rotation through the torso and also can help dramatically the transition. So if we bring him into this halfway back position here, you can see Phil's got pretty much next to no wrist set. That trail arm's very straight. You'd see a lot of guys with a little bit more bend. You can see as well how that hip's now started to rotate back a little bit more. A lot of guys you'd see, because they have more wrist set, the club shaft would probably be a little bit more in that angle, whereas obviously Phil, because he's not got a lot of wrist set, it's very much towards the camera, so that club head would be more up here, which you can see Phil is definitely not. You can see how he's raised that left heel a little bit more, and like I said, that right heel, that lead knees worked a little bit towards the ball. Very, very old school. And then let's bring him up a few more frames. You'll see how that lead heel starts to lift. You can see because he's not got a lot of wrist set, that club shaft is very much here. Like I said, the shaft or the club head would be up here if he had a little bit more wrist set. You can see how much is rotating through the lower body. That knee, that's Phil's real key. Let's bring him up to the top here. You'll really see it from face on. So from here, he actually doesn't move his body a whole lot. Can you look here and look here. Look how it's pretty much stationary. And we can really see from face on, if we watch from this position here, so that lead knee's worked in, that heel is lifted up. But watch the lower and the upper body from here. There's pretty much no movement. I mean, there's a little bit of that lead knee working inwards, but there's not a huge amount of rotation through the thorax or through the hips there. It's kind of like what you'd see in a lot of amateurs, actually. Very wide and then goes a little bit narrow. You can see how much that trail arm starts to bend at the top and how much wrist set he gets there, and loses a lot of width, which is where a lot of problems occur for Phil. But he's so talented, he can make up for him. Now, what I will say, by moving those hands over to this position here, You can see that move. That's probably about 5 mile an hour of club head speed. So if Phil does shorten it up a little bit to there, then he probably does lose a little bit of speed. So just by that lengthening of swing, he gains a ton of speed. You'll see from down the line, look how his lower body's hardly moved there to get up to that top of the backswing position. And you can see, look at that club head, you can see it in, just under that shoulder blade there. Like, it's very, very unusual position, but Phil, because he's got great hands, makes it work. So let's look how he then starts the downswing. So most of the movement's going to come from this lead side here. So we'll look from face on. You can see how the first move is kind of that slam down of the lead heel. Then the lead knee starts to rotate back. There we go. You can see how much he's sort of moved over towards the target here by starting that lead side down, shifts down, and that's the sort of transition for Phil. You don't see a lot of downward motion like a lot of guys. You can see how level those hips are. A lot of guys you'd see more of a down and up, whereas Phil's more old school using levers, and I think that's why his swings lasted so long, because he is so long and lucid, and Phil is tremendously flexible. So he gets there, not this big squat down that you'll see. Look at that position there with that club shaft. It's nearly hitting. Look at that. It must only be a couple of inches off that trail shoulder. That's just absolutely remarkable. But you can see how much lag he's created in his wrist, and this is what I was saying. Phil's unique aspect to his swing is how much he uses his hands. And, there's just not a lot of guys that could have this motion and play at Phil's level. He is an absolute unicorn. And you can see here, look how much lag has been created there. That's very, very unique. You can see how cramped he is there. It's not a swinger copy, but it works for him. I'd say Phil's a touch steep. I know he's playing a fade here, but it is his issue there. He gets a very steep and narrow. When he was working with Butch, he really tried to widen that arc out just to help, because this is what we'll see why Phil gets into so much trouble in a couple of frames down. Look how steep that shaft is now. So what you'll see now is, look, that trail arm is much higher than the lead arm in this position. You can see how much of a gap he's got there. Let me just bring him down. It's actually probably a better swing on the left hand side, but you can see that trail elbow is much higher than the lead elbow. You'll see most guys in this position, that trail elbow will actually be lower than the lead, and it just helps shallow out. You can see how steep Phil is there, and Phil is also very, very open with that club face, which is why he has a lot of rotation through the ball. So you can see very, very laggy there. Like, look at the steepness in that shaft, and look how close his hands are to his body. You'd see a lot of guys with that lag position be a little bit more out here with the hands, and like I said, the elbow would be a little bit more, the trail elbow would be low, the lead elbow. So very, very steep into the ball. You can see how he starts to widen the gap between his arms. Let's bring him down a few more frames so it's a similar delivery position. Now you can see how steep Phil is there, and the club face is just massively, massively open. I know people will say he's playing a fade here, so it's not too bad, but it is a kind of hallmark of Phil's swing being very, very open here, and you'll really see it on face on. You can see how much gap he's got between those arms, and his left arm, trail arm, I have to think about this because he's the wrong way around, really starts to flip over and rotate that trail hand just to square the face up, because like I say, you'd see guys more when they get into this pre-delivery position, that club face. I know he's playing a fade here, so it's alright that the shaft is a little bit outside the hands there, but you'd see more that club face matching the back line, which you can see it's very, very open there. Now let's bring him down a few more frames. You'll really... let me see if I can just zoom into this club. You can't quite see it here, but I want you just to look at his hands. I know it's sort of lots of rotation through. So I know when Phil's been on some of the 3D and things like that, he's got one of the highest, I think the highest ever recorded on the PGA Tour rates of rotation through the ball. So you can see it's very much a flashy action through the ball where he gets a lot of rotation through those wrists there to square up the club face. And you can see if we bring him down to this position here, look how much that trail hand has come off the club. Now, a lot of great players have done that. Ernie Els, he's somebody who that trail hand comes off, but you can see how much active release he's got through that trail hand, and that's just because he's become so steep on the downswing with that open club face, so he's squaring it. But that is why Phil hits all these shots, but I think that's also why he's so good with his short game, because he's so handsy and he's got impeccable timing. You know, you don't win, what is he won, 6 majors? You don't win that many majors without being absolutely amazingly talented. It's a very, very old school swing, and then everything else is just a release of that. So you'll see how much he sort of drives that trail knee towards the ball here. Very, very old school, driving that knee towards. You can see how much his weight moves towards the heel quite early. It's very reminiscent of the styles that were taught when Phil was growing up, whereby you get into, let that heel lift up, slam it down, and then sort of slide. The weight moves towards the heel. You can see how much he then slides the hips and the knees towards the target there. You can see how much he rotates that foot out. Look at that. Now, Phil doesn't need to do that because he's tremendously flexible, but it's very much like a leg drive swing. See how much that lead knee works out past his lead foot there. Very, very slidey. Almost like I wouldn't say it's a reverse C. Not quite got that, but you can see how a lot of guys would be much more on top of the ball here, whereas Phil's a little bit backed up just because his knees drive so much towards the target, which then tilts his spine back towards the finish, and it's just all hands and arms. Look at that. I can't believe how much he slides through that lead foot there all the way up to his finish. Let's bring him from down the line. You can see how that knee's working towards. Big release of that trail hand. Those knees really, really walking towards the target there. Big, high release. You can see how much he's up onto that heel there, and then into his follow through. So, Phil swing, very old school. It's worked for him. I think there's a lot you can take from Phil's swing in terms of like the lower body action, raising that left foot if you're a right-handed golfer, or right foot if you're a left-handed golfer. The length of the swing, you can take a little bit from that, how it does increase a little bit of speed there, but you can also take a lot from this of the bad things and how talented Mickelson actually is, considering his technique for an elite level player is actually pretty poor in a lot of senses. And I know that's a bit strange to say, criticizing such a great player, but he just relies so much on his hands and his release. It surprises me when you actually break down the swing is how much he does release those hands and how much active rotation he has through those hands and through the shaft down at the ball. But he's a tremendous, tremendous player. He's lasted the test of time. What is he, the oldest major winner? He's still competitive, still bombs it. It just shows you, keeping healthy, keeping flexible can be a huge asset to your golf game. So take Phil's swing with a bit of a pinch of salt, some of the good things he does that I think a lot of people can learn from that lower body, and then also just look at some of the bad things of how steep he gets and how much rotation he gets, and just, look at how talented this guy actually is.